Have you ever wondered if the love you cherish most could be weaponized against you by those you once trusted? What if standing up for your true self meant risking not just your career but your entire sense of belonging? And how far would you go to protect the man who showed you what real love feels like when the world tries to tear it apart? Dorian Grant stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of his San Francisco apartment, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing golden in the late afternoon sun like a bridge to a freedom he still wasn't sure he deserved. At 28, he had carved out a solid life as a corporate lawyer at one of the city's top firms. The kind of position that came with a corner office and the quiet respect of colleagues who never asked too many personal questions. Yet every time his phone lit up with a call from Ohio, the same knot twisted in his stomach. His parents, his younger sister Emily, the whole tight-knit Grant family, they still pictured him as the straight-A kid who would one day bring home a nice girl and settle down in the suburbs. Coming out felt like signing a document that would rip their world in half. That was before Gabriel Ellis walked into his life 6 months earlier at a tiny pop-up art show in the Mission District. Gabriel's paintings lined the exposed brick walls, cityscapes layered with soft brushstrokes that somehow captured loneliness and hope at the same time. Dorian had stopped in front of a canvas showing a lone figure on a foggy pier, and Gabriel, paint still flecking his rolled-up sleeves, had leaned in beside him. "That's me on my first day in California," he said with an easy laugh that made the room feel warmer. "Trying to figure out if I belonged anywhere." Their first real conversation stretched into dinner at a hole-in-the-wall taqueria, then a slow walk along the Embarcadero where the bay breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility. Gabriel, 26, supported himself as a freelance illustrator and part-time gallery assistant. He had left a small Texas town after high school, tired of the sidelong glances and Sunday sermons that made him feel like a mistake. He didn't hide who he was, but he understood the cost better than most. Dorian listened, heart hammering, and for the first time the fear inside him felt a little less suffocating. By their third date, they were sharing stories that went deeper than surface level. Gabriel talked about the boyfriend back in Texas who had begged him to stay closeted, just until we get out of here, then vanished the day after graduation. Dorian admitted he had never told anyone at the firm, not even his assistant who had worked with him for 3 years. When Gabriel reached across the small table and squeezed his hand, the touch lingered like a promise. That night, under the streetlights near Dorian's building, their first kiss happened, soft, unhurried. The kind that said, "I see you and I'm not going anywhere." Weeks turned into months. They spent lazy Sundays hiking the Marin headlands, Gabriel sketching while Dorian read case files aloud, both of them laughing when the wind stole the pages. They cooked together in Dorian's kitchen, Gabriel teasing him about his terrible knife skills, and fell asleep on the couch to old movies. For the first time Dorian felt anchored. Yet the shadows never fully left. When his sister Emily called to say she was flying out for a long weekend, panic spiked. "She's going to ask why I'm still single," he told Gabriel the night before her arrival. Gabriel just pulled him close. "Then we'll show her who you really are, if you're ready." The visit started well. Emily loved the city, and Gabriel's charm won her over instantly during a ferry ride to Alcatraz. But on the second night, over Thai takeout, she asked the question Dorian had been dreading. "So, little brother, when do I get to meet the girl who's finally going to make you settle down?" The silence stretched. Dorian glanced at Gabriel, whose steady gaze gave him courage. "There is someone," Dorian said quietly. "His name is Gabriel." Emily's fork paused midair. She recovered quickly, hugging them both before she left, but Dorian saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes. That night he lay awake, Gabriel's breathing steady beside him, wondering how many more conversations like that lay ahead. At work, the pressure mounted in subtler ways. A partner had seen them holding hands at a Pride kickoff event and made a passing comment about keeping personal matters personal. Dorian smiled through it, but the knot in his stomach tightened. He started arriving earlier, leaving later, burying himself in contracts to prove he was still the same reliable lawyer. Gabriel noticed the late nights and the way Dorian's shoulders tensed when the phone rang. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said one evening while they sat on the roof deck, watching the sunset paint the skyline orange. Whatever happens, I'm here. Their bond deepened with every shared secret and every small victory. Gabriel's latest illustration series got picked up by a local magazine, and Dorian surprised him with a framed copy of the cover on their anniversary. In return, Gabriel painted a small portrait of the two of them on the pier where they had their first real talk, the colors warm and full of light. Yet Dorian could feel the ground shifting beneath them. His parents had started asking pointed questions in their weekly calls. A former colleague from law school had texted out of the blue, hinting he had heard rumors. And somewhere in the background, a ghost from Dorian's past was stirring. Someone who had once promised to keep their brief relationship secret, but now seemed determined to rewrite history. Dorian tried to push the unease aside as summer slipped into fall. He and Gabriel had decided to make things official by moving Gabriel's things into the apartment. The weekend was filled with cardboard boxes, laughter, and the occasional argument over where to hang Gabriel's paintings. By Sunday night, the place felt like home in a way it never had before. Warm lighting, fresh flowers on the table, and the quiet certainty that they were building something real. Gabriel's art career hit a small milestone when a gallery in Soma offered him a solo show. Dorian took the day off to help set up, carrying canvases and listening to Gabriel explain the inspiration behind each piece. One painting in particular stopped him cold. Two figures walking away from a stormy horizon toward a brighter sky. "That's us," Gabriel said softly. "Leaving the hard parts behind." Dorian pulled him into a hug right there in the empty gallery, the kind of embrace that said thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. The high didn't last long. Emily's text arrived 2 weeks later. "Mom and Dad want to visit for Thanksgiving. They're worried about you." Dorian stared at the screen until Gabriel gently took the phone from his hand. "We'll face it together," he said. "No more hiding." Dorian nodded, but inside the old fears roared back. He spent the next days rehearsing conversations in his head, imagining the disappointment in his father's eyes, the careful silence from his mother. The family visit coincided with the first cold snap of the season. His parents arrived with suitcases and cautious smiles. Dinner at a waterfront restaurant started polite, talk of the flight, the weather, Dorian's latest case. Then his father cleared his throat. "Son, we've heard things. About you and a friend." The word hung heavy. Dorian felt Gabriel's hand find his under the table. "His name is Gabriel," Dorian said, voice steady even though his pulse raced. "And he's more than a friend. He's the person I love." The silence that followed stretched like a courtroom pause before a verdict. His mother's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. His father set his fork down, face unreadable. "We raised you better than this," he said quietly. Gabriel spoke up then, calm and respectful, sharing just enough of his own story to humanize the moment. Emily tried to smooth things over, but the evening ended early. Back at the apartment, Dorian paced while Gabriel made tea. "They didn't yell," Gabriel pointed out. "That's something." Dorian wanted to believe him, but the ache in his chest said otherwise. Work offered no escape. A major client had requested Dorian personally, but the partner pulled him aside and warned that any distractions could affect the account. Dorian nodded, jaw tight, and threw himself into the brief. That night he came home exhausted and found Gabriel waiting with takeout and a new sketch of the two of them laughing on their rooftop. The small gesture melted some of the tension, but Dorian still woke at 3 a.m., replaying his father's words. Meanwhile, an unexpected message appeared in Dorian's inbox from Marcus Hale, a man he had dated briefly 3 years earlier before either of them was ready to be open. Marcus had been deep in the closet, terrified of losing his finance job. Their relationship had ended amicably, or so Dorian thought. The email was short and cold. "We need to talk. In person." Dorian showed it to Gabriel, who frowned but said, "Hear him out. Maybe it's nothing." They agreed to meet at a neutral cafe the following week. The cafe meeting started civil. Marcus looked the same, polished suit, careful smile, but his eyes held something sharper. "I saw the pictures of you two at Pride," he said. "You look happy. Real happy." Then the tone shifted. Thing is, when you came out publicly it dragged up old rumors about me. Clients pulled accounts. I lost a promotion. I've been thinking maybe you owe me for that. Dorian stared, stunned. Marcus, we were over years ago. You chose to stay hidden. Marcus leaned forward. I'm not asking for much. Just compensation for the damage. 2 million should cover it. The number landed like a slap. Dorian stood up, heart pounding. This is insane. I'm not paying you anything. He left the cafe shaking. Gabriel met him at the door that evening, took one look at his face, and pulled him into the safest hug he had ever felt. Whatever he's doing, we'll handle it, Gabriel whispered. But Dorian already sensed the storm gathering. The next morning, a process server appeared at the firm with a thick envelope. Civil complaint. Marcus Hale v. Dorian Grant. Demand for $2 million in emotional distress and lost wages. The lawsuit claimed Dorian's public relationship had exposed Marcus's past and destroyed his professional reputation. It was ridiculous, vindictive, and completely baseless. Dorian sat in his office staring at the papers until the words blurred. Gabriel arrived an hour later after a frantic text, carrying coffee and the quiet strength Dorian needed. They read the complaint together line by line, and for the first time the fear felt shared instead of solitary. This isn't about money, Gabriel said. It's about control. But we're not giving it to him. That night they lay awake talking strategy, making lists of evidence, deciding which lawyer friend to call. The lawsuit had arrived like a wrecking ball, yet something unexpected happened in its wake. Dorian felt a spark of defiance he hadn't known he possessed. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving his identity, he was ready to defend it. The weeks that followed blurred into a grind of legal meetings and sleepless nights. Dorian hired an attorney named Lena Torres, a sharp woman who specialized in civil rights cases and didn't flinch at the details. This suit is frivolous, she told them in her downtown office. We'll file a motion to dismiss and ask for sanctions. But it's going to get ugly before it gets better. Gabriel sat beside Dorian, hand on his knee, nodding at every point. He had taken on extra illustration gigs to help cover the mounting legal costs, never once complaining. At home, the atmosphere shifted. Dorian caught himself checking his phone constantly, waiting for the next email from Marcus's lawyer. Gabriel tried to keep things normal, cooking Sunday brunch, dragging Dorian to the farmer's market. But the tension crept into everything. One evening after a particularly brutal deposition prep, Dorian snapped at Gabriel over something trivial. I'm sorry, he said immediately, pulling Gabriel close. I'm terrified I'm going to lose everything we've built. Gabriel kissed his forehead. You're not losing me. That's the one thing Marcus can't touch. The firm's partners called Dorian in for a closed-door meeting. They had seen the news of the lawsuit. Marcus had leaked select details to a gossip blog, and they wanted assurances that the case wouldn't affect client confidence. Dorian stood tall. This is personal retaliation. It has no merit. The partners nodded, but the warning was clear. Keep it contained. He left the meeting feeling smaller than when he entered. Thanksgiving came and went without his parents. They sent a card with a generic message, but the silence spoke louder. Emily called daily, offering support and asking how Gabriel was holding up. He's my rock, Dorian told her. And for the first time he believed it completely. Gabriel had started attending a support group for partners of people facing discrimination, coming home with stories that mirrored their own. We're not alone, he would say, and Dorian started to feel the truth of it. Marcus's lawyer pushed for a settlement conference. The demand had risen to $2.5 million. Lena advised against any payment. Giving in now sets a terrible precedent, she said. Dorian agreed, but the financial pressure mounted. Gabriel sold 2 large paintings to cover their retainer and refused Dorian's offer to pay him back. We're a team, he insisted. In quiet moments Dorian watched Gabriel sketching at the kitchen table and felt a surge of gratitude so fierce it almost hurt. The media picked up the story in small ways. A local LGBT blog ran a piece titled, "Ex-Lover Sues Gay Attorney for Coming Out," Comments flooded in, some supportive, others vicious. Dorian read them late at night when Gabriel slept, each hateful word chipping at his confidence. One morning he woke to find Gabriel had left a note on the pillow. "They can sue your past. They can't sue our future." The simple words anchored him through the day. As winter deepened, the case moved toward trial. Discovery revealed Marcus's shaky financial history and contradictory statements about his own sexuality. Lena grew more confident. "We have them on the ropes," she said. Yet Dorian's internal battle raged. He questioned whether his love for Gabriel had truly caused harm to anyone. Gabriel sensed the doubt and one night sat him down. "Your happiness isn't a crime. Marcus is choosing pain over growth. That's on him, not you." A breakthrough came during a weekend trip to Big Sur they had almost canceled. Standing on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, Gabriel turned to him. "Whatever the judge decides, we walk out of that courtroom together. Stronger." Dorian kissed him then, the salt wind whipping around them, and for the first time since the lawsuit began he felt the weight lift just a little. The ocean stretched endless, and so, he realized, did their future if they chose to fight for it. Back in the city, the trial date was set for March. Dorian prepared his testimony, practicing in front of the mirror while Gabriel timed him. Friends from the art community rallied, offering character statements. Even Emily flew out to attend the first hearing. The support network grew quietly but steadily, reminding Dorian that identity wasn't a solitary battle. March arrived with rain that mirrored the storm inside the courtroom. The San Francisco Superior Court building loomed gray and imposing as Dorian and Gabriel climbed the steps, Lena walking between them like a shield. Marcus sat across the aisle with his lawyer, eyes avoiding theirs. The gallery filled with a mix of curious onlookers and quiet supporters wearing small rainbow pins. Jury selection took 2 days. Dorian watched potential jurors answer questions about bias and same-sex relationships, his stomach in knots. When the panel was seated, Lena opened strong, painting the lawsuit as a clear case of retaliation. Marcus's attorney countered by portraying his client as the victim of a very public betrayal. Dorian testified first, voice steady as he described their brief past relationship, the mutual decision to part ways, and the years of silence that followed. "I never outed him," he said firmly. "I simply chose to live honestly." Cross-examination tried to rattle him. Questions about his firm, his family, his lifestyle choices. Dorian answered each one with facts, refusing to let shame creep in. When Gabriel took the stand the next day, the room seemed to hold its breath. He spoke about their life together, the support he had given Dorian, and how the lawsuit had tested but never broken them. "Love isn't a debt," he said quietly. "It's a gift, and no one can put a price tag on that." Marcus testified last, voice cracking as he described lost promotions and sleepless nights. Yet, under Lena's cross-examination, the story unraveled. Bank records showed Marcus's finances had been shaky long before Dorian's coming out. Text messages from years earlier proved the breakup had been amicable. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense stare, watched everything closely. Outside the courtroom each day, Dorian and Gabriel walked hand in hand through the rain, stopping for coffee and quiet talks. "We're doing this," Gabriel would say, squeezing his fingers. Dorian started to believe it. His parents surprised everyone by calling the night before closing arguments. "We've been watching the news," his father said gruffly. "We don't understand everything, but we're proud you're fighting for what's right." The words landed like unexpected sunlight. Closing arguments lasted a single tense morning. Lena dismantled the damages claim piece by piece, asking the jury to see the suit for what it was: punishment for living openly. Marcus's lawyer appealed to emotion, painting Dorian as careless with another man's heart. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Dorian and Gabriel waited in a small conference room, pacing, holding each other, whispering memories of their first date, their rooftop nights, the painting that still hung above their bed. When the bailiff called them back, the courtroom felt charged. The foreman stood. "We find for the defendant. The claim is dismissed in full." A collective exhale rippled through the room. But the real shock came next. The judge cleared her throat and addressed Marcus directly. This lawsuit was brought without reasonable basis and appears motivated by personal animus. Therefore, the plaintiff shall bear the entirety of court costs, attorney fees for both sides, and an additional sanction for wasting judicial resources. The gavel struck. Marcus's face drained of color. Dorian felt the ground steady beneath him for the first time in months. Outside on the courthouse steps, rain had stopped and sunlight broke through. Gabriel pulled Dorian into a fierce hug while cameras flashed and supporters cheered. Lena smiled beside them. "Justice doesn't always move fast," she said. "But when it moves right." The weeks after the ruling felt like waking from a long nightmare. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a victory for authenticity over revenge. Dorian's firm issued a quiet statement of support, and several partners who had been distant now stopped by his office to shake his hand. The financial burden lifted almost overnight. Marcus's side wired the full amount of fees and sanctions within the court-ordered deadline. Dorian transferred a portion to Gabriel's account as repayment for the illustration gigs, but Gabriel refused most of it. "Keep it for our future," he said with a grin. They celebrated quietly at first. A candlelit dinner on the roof where Gabriel had set up fairy lights and their favorite playlist. Dorian raised a glass. "To the man who stood beside me when the world tried to tear us down." Gabriel's eyes shone. "To the man who finally stopped hiding." They danced slowly under the city lights, the lawsuit already feeling like a distant chapter. Dorian's family reached out more openly. His mother sent a care package filled with homemade cookies and a note that simply said, "We love you both." Emily planned a summer visit with her new boyfriend, promising no awkward questions. The gradual acceptance felt like healing stitches on an old wound. Gabriel's own circle expanded too. His gallery offered him a permanent exhibit slot, citing the courage he had shown during the trial as inspiration for a new series titled Unbreakable Bonds. Yet the experience left scars that needed tending. Dorian started therapy to unpack the years of fear he had carried. Gabriel joined him for a few sessions, and together they learned new ways to communicate when doubt crept back in. One evening Dorian admitted, "I almost let Marcus win by believing I deserved the punishment." Gabriel listened, then replied, "You deserve justice. And we got it." They took a long weekend in Napa Valley, staying at a small inn surrounded by vineyards. No court dates, no headlines, just walks through the rows of grapes and talks about what came next. Gabriel sketched the landscape while Dorian read a novel for pleasure instead of case law. On their last night, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I used to think coming out would cost me everything," Dorian said. "Turns out it gave me the only things that matter." Back in San Francisco, life settled into a new rhythm. Dorian took on pro bono cases for LGBT youth facing discrimination, channeling the pain of the lawsuit into purpose. Gabriel's art reflected the journey, canvases bright with color yet grounded in resilience. Friends gathered for a small housewarming-style party, toasting the couple who had turned a courtroom battle into a love story worth telling. One quiet Sunday morning Dorian woke to find Gabriel already up, coffee brewing. On the kitchen table sat a new painting. Two men standing on courthouse steps, hands linked, the sky behind them clear and vast. "For us," Gabriel said. Dorian pulled him close, the scent of paint and fresh coffee wrapping around them like a promise kept. The internal growth was the real victory. Dorian no longer measured his worth by other people's approval. Gabriel had learned that supporting someone through crisis didn't mean losing himself. Together they had faced betrayal, prejudice, and fear, and emerged not just intact but stronger. Spring brought new beginnings. Dorian and Gabriel stood on the same pier where their first real conversation had happened, the bay sparkling under a cloudless sky. Dorian carried a small box in his pocket, nerves dancing like the sailboats in the distance. He had practiced the words 100 times, yet when the moment came they flowed naturally. "Gabriel Ellis, you stood with me when the world tried to break us. You taught me that love isn't something to hide but something to fight for. Will you marry me?" Gabriel's answer came in a kiss so full of joy it drew smiles from passers-by. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They laughed, hugged, and walked hand in hand toward the future they had defended in court and in their hearts. The wedding was small and intentional. Close friends, Emily and her boyfriend, even Dorian's parents who had flown in with cautious but genuine warmth. The ceremony took place in a sunlit garden overlooking the city. Gabriel wore a simple linen suit with a paintbrush boutonniere. Dorian chose navy with a rainbow thread woven into the lapel. When they exchanged vows, the words carried the weight of every trial they had survived. "I choose you," Dorian said. "Not because it's easy, but because you make me brave," Gabriel replied. "I choose you because your love showed me that justice and tenderness can live in the same heart." After the ceremony, they danced under string lights, while friends toasted to the couple who had turned a lawsuit into a love story. Marcus never contacted them again. The court sanctions and public scrutiny had been lesson enough. Dorian's firm promoted him to senior counsel, citing his integrity under pressure. Gabriel's exhibit sold out opening night, the Unbreakable Bonds series earning critical praise. Months later, they bought a small house in the hills with a studio for Gabriel and an office for Dorian. On quiet evenings, they sat on the porch remembering the 3 questions that had once haunted Dorian's nights. The answers had come through struggle, through choice, through unwavering partnership. They had faced the worst and discovered the best version of themselves. Life continued with ordinary joys and occasional challenges, but the foundation built in that courtroom remained unshakable. Dorian mentored young lawyers navigating their own identities. Gabriel taught art workshops for LGBTQ youth, passing on the lesson that creativity and courage walk hand in hand. Their story, once private, became a quiet beacon for others facing similar battles. On their first anniversary, Dorian found Gabriel on the roof, painting the city skyline at dusk. He wrapped his arms around him from behind and whispered, "Thank you for fighting beside me." Gabriel turned, smiling. "Thank you for letting me." The sunset painted them gold, a perfect echo of the bridge that had once seemed so far away. In the end, the Unreasonable lawsuit had not destroyed them. It had forged them, and the judge's ruling had done more than dismiss a claim. It had affirmed that love, when defended with truth and courage, always finds its way to justice. Looking back on Dorian and Gabriel's journey, the clearest lesson is that authenticity isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. When fear and prejudice turn love into a target, the bravest choice is to stand together anyway. The courtroom victory showed that justice can surprise us when we refuse to shrink. My gentle advice: stop measuring your worth by other people's comfort. Live openly, love fiercely, and trust that the right people and the right rulings will meet you there. Growth comes not from avoiding storms but from learning to dance in the rain.